Very good morning, very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hard Talk HR Up Close and Personal Dave Ulrich webinar. My name is Mihai Nagy. I'm the founder and director of the HR Congress, the organization organizing the HR Congress in Brussels this year. Today's webinar will be focusing on 4 important issues. Primarily starting with the HR strategy, which basically, what is it required from HR professionals to become a true source of value? Then we cover issues on HR business partnering. What is the new expectations of the HR business partners, and how, just a bit of a clarification of what the HR business partner model is. Certainly, many of our attendees are interested in HR and technology, whether technology is an enabler, whether it's a disruptor, whether it helps, and what is the future holds like when it comes to advancing technology into the HR role. Last but not least, we shall be covering issues on the future of HR, what is a profession looks like in the next 10, 15 years ahead, looking at the crystal ball, if we can do so with the help of our expert speaker, Professor Ulrich. If you are a Twitter user, please do tweet with us. Our Twitter hashtag is HR Congress 17. If you hear something good, something interesting, something insightful, something inspiring, using the hashtag HR Congress 17 will help to spread the word and share it with the community. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Professor Dave Ulrich. Dave is a Rensselaer Collegiate Professor of Business Administration at the Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, and a partner at the RBL Group, author of countless books and articles, and one of the most influential thinker when it comes to HR, the father of modern HR. Dave, it's a delight and privilege having you here. Thank you very much for joining us today.
What a privilege as well. And a good afternoon, good morning, or good evening to anyone who's listening, either live or by tape. What a privilege to work with you, and look forward to the session. Very much look forward to the session in Brussels.
Thank you, Dave. Let's deep dive straight away into HR strategy as probably one of the topics which most interesting for most of our attendees. You start your book, Victory Through Organization, with a very powerful sentence. HR is not about HR. HR is about value creation. So in your view, what are the biggest reasons why HR departments are failing to add strategic value?
Well, the first comment I would make is that it's not the department that adds value, it's the people in the department, because you want to get the HR people thinking about value. And I think the biggest barrier, I think, is not in line managers. I think the biggest barrier is in the mindset and the perception of HR professionals. We did a workshop in May where we talked about HR creating value, and one of the participants went home and he did a survey of his line managers and said, here's all the HR practices we could do: training, staffing, career planning, communications, organization design. What do you think? And the line managers didn't respond well. And he called me in June and he said, Dave, I attended your seminar and it didn't help me with managers. And I said, what did you do? And he told me about the survey. And I felt so bad, because I said, somehow our seminar did not connect with you. You did the wrong survey. Line managers really don't care very much about our HR practices, staffing, training, compensation. What they care about is their business issue. And for us to add value as HR professionals, we have to start with the business, because value is defined by the receiver. What does the manager get from us? And I said to the man, go do another survey. What does your business require to win? Is it cost and efficiency? Is it product innovation? Is it customer centricity? Is it quality? What is your business require? And then our job in HR is to build the HR practices that we know that will deliver those valued outcomes. That's what I hope we do in November. We're not going to teach you to get line managers to care about HR. They care about their business. And HR is not about doing our work. It's about doing our work so that managers get value in the things they care about. And I think that mindset is value is defined by the receiver is so critical for HR professionals to acquire, because when we get it, we think much less about what we do. Final quick example, and I'm going long on this question because it's so fundamental to what we do. I often have the privilege, as you do and others, to talk to HR executives. I almost always start with the question, what's the biggest challenge in your business? And even today, a high percent of the time, people say, oh, the biggest challenge in my business is hiring people or retaining people or training people or managing compensation. Wrong, 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 wrong. The biggest challenge in my business is winning in the marketplace. And people in HR still define business as HR, not as the business. Or the final one, I said I was final, I'll do another final answer. I often ask HR people, who are your customers? Simple question. Oh, it's the employees of the company. Wrong again. Well, not wrong, but incomplete. I mean, the real customer of HR is the customer of the business. That's the mindset that I think keeps us sometimes from doing HR strategy that drives business strategy.
It's great insights, Dave. Thank you so much. I mean, we could talk about 1 or 2 hours of each of these topics, and unfortunately, we are pressed for time. But we try to dive deep as much as possible. Outside in approach, we talked about just before we logged in the webinar. Talked about how much of our current HR leaders and still HR professionals are buried under administrative tasks, and they are required to do more with less. So it's very difficult to really focus on the strategy, focus on the outside in approach. So outside in approach seems to be practically taking a lot of time for HR. But based on your view and based on your experience, how do we start moving the needle?
I think in HR, we need to continually be asking the question, what's the impact of what I'm doing on customers, investors, and communities outside of the boundary of the organization? And when we do that, we get focused. Now, clearly, we're burdened with administrative tasks. They have to be done. We're going to talk later in the webinar about technology. Hopefully, the digital technology and the Internet of Things and robotics and machine learning, it's going to help us get rid of some of that administrative time. So my first response is focus outside in on value to customers, investors, communities. Second, try as best we can to get that administrative work done through technology as a replacement of service centers so that we can focus on value added for the business.
In your book, Victory Through Organization, you suggest the importance of focusing on organization versus just the talent. Of course, talent must be in attention as well, but you suggest organization is just simply more important. Why is it important, and how would you overcome the dilemma that in practice, it's much easier to achieve quick wins and demonstrate HR value, demonstrate HR impact via talent processes and improving on talent processes versus in long run, adjusting organizations, changing culture, having a bigger organization view. It just takes much more time. So 2 questions, a loaded question, I know that. So question number 1 is, why is it important to focus on organization versus talent more? And secondly, how would you suggest for HR leaders in practice to overcome the dilemma of focusing on talent gives you a short-term win versus focusing on organization takes longer time, therefore your visibility might not be so prompt as if you get your talent practices right?
And again, each of these we could spend hours on. This one is a whole book. But the first question is, why organization or talent? And I've done this before, and I'll probably do it in November again. So if I hold up one hand with fingers, I have 5 fingers, that's talent. If I hold up the other hand as a fist, that's organization. Which one has the biggest impact on business results? And we've done the research, and it's amazing finding. 4-to-1 organization. The quality of talent matters. You have to have good people, the 5 fingers. But when they come together as a fist, they come together in an integrated way as a good team or organization, they have 4 times the business impact. What a remarkable finding. And you see it everywhere. Again, you see it in sports. It's not the individual that wins the championship, it's the team. You see it in movies. You see it in any organization. It's the collective. And I think one of the future of HR that we'll talk to later in the webinar is we have to evolve and pivot our thinking, that we do talk about talent, but we talk about how talent comes together as an organization. Now, your second question is, how do we do that simply? I think anytime we begin to look at an HR practice, we look at talent, we look at hiring or training or compensation. What is the organizational capability that we're trying to establish when we hire people? What is the culture? What's the capability we're trying to build when we pay people? What's the capability we're building with training? And so any isolated HR activity becomes integrated around the organizational capability that we're trying to instill. And that organizational capability becomes not just a filter, but an integrator to keep our HR practices connected to each other. So net, I'm an HR person. I'm in a meeting. We're talking about hiring people. One of the organizational questions I'd say is, what's the organizational culture or capability we're trying to create? We want to be known at Disney for guest service. We want to be known at Google for analytics and the ability to manage information. We want to be known at Amazon for efficient delivery. Are the people we're hiring able to deliver those capabilities? And that's how the capability practice or culture practice begins to be an integrator of all of our HR work.
Terrific. One last question. In the 2016 HR competency model, you suggest HR leaders must become a credible activist. And one of the strategic requirements is about total rewards. So one of the questions we received is, how do you see the role of total rewards evolving in the HR agenda of the future?
Two insights that are interesting. One, when we did our statistics, and I'll try to explain this pretty simply, we had 123 items or skill sets of HR people, and we did a factor analysis, and we came up with 9 domains. When we did that analysis with HR people, they did not see total rewards as central to HR. When we did it with business people, line managers, measuring those 123 items, the factor analysis, they saw total rewards as absolutely critical. I think sometimes in HR, we forget that compensation, financial and non-financial rewards are in fact part of the basket of HR tools. And so total rewards is both the financial rewards and the non-financial rewards. And we in HR should be weaving them into every decision we make. So when we try to build that culture of guest service at Disney, or information analytics at Google, the reward system should drive that culture. One of the experts in compensation and rewards is Charlie Tharp, and he had a brilliant line. He said, executive compensation is communication. What a reward system does is it communicates and signals what really matters here. So what are we incenting? At Disney, they're incenting good guest service. At Google, they're incenting information and analytics skills. At Amazon, they're incenting efficiency and delivery. And the reward system that sets that in place reinforces it over time. Final caveat. I've been involved, as have you, Mihai, and many others, in lots of organizational transformations. Lots of people say, let's start the transformation by changing the reward system. I am now of the opinion, start the transformation by changing the behavior. Get people to think and behave differently, and then use the reward system to reinforce and sustain the transformation. I think a reward change is hard. Changing compensation and systems is very demanding, but it's critical to sustain a long-term transformation.
Terrific insights. Thank you very, very much, Dave. And it's moving on to the next session, HR business partnering. It is so important. It's been so misunderstood in many organizations. So I'd like to start with the HR business partner model. And as you suggest, HR business partner model is not a role, yet organizations often confuse this. Can you please explain?
You know, when in the 1990s, I'm attributed to coming up with the term HR business partner, and frankly, I didn't come up with it. My colleagues and I, we spend a lot of time, as you do, Mihai, and others in the field, visiting companies, doing research, and then trying to distill the insights that we come up with. In the 1990s, HR departments were trying to restructure in order to be more successful. One of the roles they came up with was the embedded HR professional, an HR generalist who worked in a business unit, a geography, or a function. So I could be the head of HR for engineering, I could be the head of HR for Europe, I could be the head of HR for a business unit. And that role of generalist versus specialist became one of the dialogues. And so we did work around a business partner is that generalist. Well, in 1990s, that was not a bad idea. But one of the things I love to talk about is in the ensuing 20 years, things have changed. This for me is really fun. In 1997, when I did the book when the book HR Champions was published, the most common browser was Netscape. The Sony PlayStation with a 128K memory card was popular. Apple had just introduced the PowerBook. Cordless phones, not cell phones, not the smartphones. Cordless phones were brand new. And it's amazing, 40% of the people in the world had a PC. Well, you know what? That's really funny in 20 years. The same is true of the business partner. There has been an enormous change. It's no longer just a role. When we think about HR business partner, we think about an entire logic structure of HR adding value to the business. And so, and in the last number of years, and I could go through all these, but I would bore you to death. But in November, we're happy to talk about them, and we'll post them and get them out there. I identified about 13 things that business partner logic is about. For example, it's about adding value. It's about understanding the context and the setting in which we work. It's about being business partners, about understanding our stakeholders, the employees inside and the customers outside. It's about the evolution of talent and knowing where talent's going. It's about the evolution of organization. It's about information. I've got 13 things. Business partner now is not just a role in the company. Business partner is about a logic of helping HR professionals deliver value to the organizations where they work. And that's as big a change as Netscape as the browser. I mean, we now have multiple browsers. It's as big a change as the Sony PlayStation. And the funny part is 128K memory. I mean, today 128K memory wouldn't run any apps on anything. It's as big a change as the cordless phone to the smartphone. We're seeing the same evolution in business partners. So when I hear people saying, "Oh, the business partner doesn't work," I think they're taking a cordless phone and saying, "My cordless phone from 1997 won't run all the apps on my smartphone." Duh. The smartphone has replaced it. And I think maybe we should come up with new terms. I don't like new terms as much, but I think that's the evolution that we've seen. It's a much broader concept about overall helping the business win.
So in overall, there are still roles in organizations called HR business partners, and of course there is the CHRO. So if we were to break it down to roles, how would you see what is the role of the CHRO versus what is the role of HR business partners in implementing successful business partnership?
My sense is we've redefined and broadened the concept of business partner. We've shifted it from a role. I think a CHRO is a business partner. I think an embedded HR person who's a generalist is a business partner. I'm so bold now as to say a specialist in a center of expertise in compensation or learning or development is also a business partner. That all of those roles have a purpose. And the success is back to where we were before. Your brilliant question about how do we add value to the business? If I'm the head of compensation, and we talked about total rewards, what am I doing to help the business win in the marketplace? What communication, what triggers am I making that will help my employees focus on things customers care about? If I'm the embedded HR person, obviously, in a business unit, what am I doing to better anticipate and build value from customers and from investors? As the chief HR officer, what am I doing to facilitate change, to design and deliver HR practices, to architect a process for winning in the business. And all of those business partners are around the agenda of helping us win in the marketplace.
One of the practical questions coming from one of our listeners is about business partnering in virtual teams. Most organizations work in matrix across countries, across continent. Reporting lines are not fully clear. So an agile business partner have a really hard time to build relationship and build strategic impact, have been such a strategic impact when it comes to virtual teams and virtual environment. What would you suggest in terms of implementing business partnership in a virtual environment?
A virtual team is not just about the business partner. It's about helping the team and organization obviously be successful. The first thing I'd start with, if I'm a business partner with a virtual team, is to recognize the characteristics of a high-performing team. And again, one of the things I love to do, whether it's helpful or not helpful, people will decide, but I love to take very complex literatures, and Pat Lencioni and dozens of people, Ed Lawler, Richard Hackman, even more than Ed Lawler, have written about high-performing teams. There's literally thousands of work. My distillation of that is there's 4 characteristics. Characteristic 1 is the high-performing team has a clear purpose. What are we trying to accomplish? Not only as a team, but those we serve and add value to. Number 2, what's our governance? How often do we meet? How do we make decisions? How many members of the team? How do we get things done? How do we govern? Number 3, how do we relate to each other? How do we care about each other, even at a distance, at a virtual distance? And we'll talk about that with digital HR. How do we also disagree with each other? How do we manage the inherent relationships at work? And number 4, how do we learn? How do we constantly improve? So I think the first step for an HR person on a virtual team is what makes a great team: purpose, governance, relationships, and learning. The second is, in a virtual team, one of the things we've learned is that being separated, sometimes we need to be face-to-face. It's lovely to say that we can do everything by this webinar. And by the way, I'll say it again, this webinar, I think, is going to share a lot of information, much of which will be repeated in November. But come to the November session, because there's something to be said about face-to-face and seeing not just hearing the words, but feeling and sensing the image and the passion and the dialogue that comes. So virtual teams almost always need to start with face-to-face connection, that there's a relationship, there's a face-to-face. In fact, the people in our consulting firm, I work virtually with almost everybody. Whenever I visit them, I say, can I go spend time in the place where you're going to be sitting when we're on the phone or when we're online, so I can visualize that person and see and face-to-face becomes a critical part. And then periodically to get back together, if it's twice a year or whatever the economics allow, but to make sure that the virtual distance is not the only thing that we have.
That's in fact very, very interesting. I get this question many times, whether me as a conference organizer, am I being worried that the digital technology will replace face-to-face meetings? And I always respond, fortunately, humans develop and evolve much slower than technology. So just simply having a handshake or look in each other's eyes, technology cannot fully replace it. It can help to improve on the experience, but the human touch, it's just not replaceable. Brings us to the next topic about HR and technology.
I really like what you just said, only I'd turn it around. I think humans are more advanced than technology, and that human touch or human feel is something I think technology may chase, but even with artificial intelligence, I'm not sure it will ever catch up with that ability to feel passion and to feel purpose and to feel connection, which I'll talk about later in relationships. And I hope in human resources we never lose sight of the human, that it is a critical part of who we are and what we do. So like just a big reinforcement.
Absolutely, and I certainly don't mean to bring it to a philosophical level. I have my views on artificial intelligence and what will happen if it evolves to the level whereby humans potentially be replaceable. Whether we are living a simulation right now, we never know. Nevertheless, let's back to our current reality in terms of HR and technology, whether it's a disruptor, enabler, and what the future holds in terms of technology. How should HR respond, in your view, to digitization trends such as automation, robotics, artificial intelligence? What would be your suggestion? What would be your advice for HR leaders when it comes to new technology and what the future holds?
It's a great question. I would like to ask me, what do you think? Well, let me give my views, and then I'd love to get your views because you're such a thoughtful observer of this field. And let me this is going to be a little bit of a longer answer, and we have a little bit of time here. So the first is to put some things into perspective. I've been around the HR field longer than most of the people on the phone call, and it's really interesting. This is a field that is enamored with the latest fad, and so a new idea comes up and everybody gets all excited about the idea and thinks it's going to change everything that's ever existed before. Millennials, they're going to change the entire way we do work. HR analytics is going to, and information is going to change everything about which we do work. Internet, e-learning is going to change everything about training. And it's a field. And I remember doing a paper in the United States and HR Planning Society called State of the Art with Bob Eichinger. And we said, we're a field that loves to find the shiny new object and go for it. And what happens in my mind is the shiny new object, if you have a graph, a chart, it goes up in attention, gets a lot of attention, which is really good. And then it gets woven into the day-to-day picture or puzzle of an overall successful HR agenda. That there's not one shiny object that's going to change the whole HR field. I feel the same about digital HR. Right now, everybody's saying automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. This is going to change everything. Well, I don't think it's going to change everything. I think it's going to have a major piece in how we think about and deliver HR. But I think we have to keep it in perspective. And I think our field has been known to try to manage some of that. So with that in mind and backdrop, and I don't mean to undermine, artificial intelligence is coming, automation is coming. We're doing work on that. We're seeing the impact. I think there's 4 phases. And so let me walk through these 4 phases very quickly of where we are today in digital HR and technology and where I hope we go. Phase 1 of digital technology is using information to do HR more efficiently. And a lot of the administrative work that we talked about before that's a burden, we should be able to do more efficiently. And through artificial intelligence and machine learning, and especially robots, all of that standard transactional administrative work, I think we can begin to put onto technology platforms. What does this mean in phase 1 of efficiency for HR? I think we're going to see a demise of outside contracted service centers. I think 20 years ago, we went to service centers who could begin to do the administrative work more efficiently through scale and size. I think that work now can get put into technology platforms that becomes employee self-service. So phase 1 of technology in HR is getting rid of some of that administrative burden, the logistics of payroll, the logistics of training, the logistics of hiring, and being able to do that more efficiently. Phase 2 is HR innovation. I bet, Mihai, you get the same emails I get. I bet 2 or 3 times a week, I get an email about the latest innovation in HR digital that will change everything in talent or performance or communication or leadership. And the beauty is there are literally dozens and hundreds of HR innovations that are being planted and raised up in the last number of years. The challenge we have with this HR innovation is to figure out which ones make the most sense. In fact, I'm in the middle of writing a column for LinkedIn about how do you know which of these many HR innovations make sense. I talk to HR professionals and I say, so what do you do with all the HR technology innovation that's coming at you? You get the same 2 or 3 emails I get every week with the latest and greatest idea. And a high percent of people say, I don't know where to go, so I just delete them all. By the way, that's really stupid because you can't do them all and you can't delete them all. So how do we know which of those items to have for innovation? Do we? And we got to be able to filter. Phase one is efficiency. Phase two is innovation. My sense right now is that probably, I don't know the right percent, but 80 to 90% of HR digital work is in those two phases. We're innovating more in HR and how we do compensation or training or staffing. We're getting more efficiency in all the logistics and administrative work. I think we need to go to phase three and then phase four. Phase three is information. In our research, the organizational capability that had the biggest impact on business success. So what's the capability that lets us win was called external sensing. And what external sensing is bringing external information into the organization. So it's external information about markets and customers. It's external information about products and services, about where we need to go as a company. I think HR and digital HR should be a forum for beginning to acquire and access and source that external information. What's interesting is you'd think that would be done through the IT, information technology department, but they're mostly worried about the systems, not the information management. I think in HR, we can partner with marketing. We can partner with IT to identify and bring in that external information that would help us be successful in what we do. And I think that information piece is so critical because information is ultimately insight and power and allows us to anticipate future impact. So phase one is efficiency. Phase two is innovation. Phase three is information. And then I think where I hope we head with technology is connection. And connection sounds, well, technology is obviously a connector, but it's not right now because I think connection is not, I've tried this year to learn how to do more on LinkedIn and I'm trying to get better and I get seduced. How many likes did I get? How many comments did I get? How many followers do I have? Well, that's not a connection. That's a superficial connection. Connection is really a personal connection, a relationship. The ability that when you make a bid, somebody will respond. I think where we need to go in technology is to get technology as a personal connection mechanism, not a differentiating mechanism. By the way, this is a horribly long answer, but I think there are four phases of digital. Phase one and phase two, efficiency and innovation, I think we're making great progress. Phase three is information. I think we're beginning to get an understanding of how to source external information and bring it in. Phase four is connection. I don't think we've got that yet. I think, in fact, I go on to university campuses and I think, oh, technology and Facebook and WeChat and all these wonderful tools are connecting people, but they're not, because what I see are students wearing headphones and they're actually using technology to isolate themselves, or the connection is dysfunctional. Boy, I'm going to stop. This will be my final comment on this question because I've gone so long. We were in Australia recently and my wife and I were doing workshops. She's a very prominent psychologist and works a lot with teenagers. She bought a book about Australian teenage young women, 14 to 16. The biggest cause of death among those young women is suicide. What a horrible tragedy. And the author said one of the problems we've got with modern technology like Facebook or WeChat is or Instagram, when you post pictures of what you're doing, they're always happy. And so a young girl or a teenage girl looks at all of the people that are on her friends list being happy all of the time. They're always smiling, they're always happy, they're always chatting. Well, here's the reality of life. We're not always happy all the time. We're not always chatting. And so in comparison, the technology that should be helping us manage the good times and the bad is making us feel worse about ourselves because we're not doing what others are doing. Boy, do I worry about that. And I hope we can find in HR the use of technology to connect people around meaning, around purpose. And we're seeing some targets of that. We're seeing early innovators where people are starting to use technology to help people connect with each other. Now, I've given you a way long answer on this. Let me go back and capture it again so that my way long answer can be at least sort of understood. One, no question, there is an evolution in technology that's critical, but it's the shiny new object. It's going to weave into long-term organizational success when it becomes an integrated piece of the HR puzzle. That integrated piece has 4 steps: efficiency, innovation, which are doing pretty well, information, and connection, where I think we need to head. So, long answer to your question.
But it was very, very insightful. In fact, many organizations probably
so
are.
May I take that question, because I think it's such a great question. What do you think, Mihai? Where do you see this technology, digitization kind of space going?
I'll reply very briefly because most of our attendees logged in to listen to your views. However, I'm happy to share very briefly my 5 cents. I certainly think technology is an enabler. It helps artificial intelligence in chatbots. It helps to improve on speed, improve on efficiency. It helps to, there are countless examples how it helps to take out bias from interviewing. It enables HR professionals to interview using artificial intelligence, interview all the candidates, not just the selected candidates, and have an objective feedback on their capabilities. I just spoke recently with Jay Summit, the vice chairman of Deloitte's Digital, and what he told me is very insightful also about digital and HR, how the grid system in the US in jeopardy because people are retiring and the newly skilled people are updating and upgrading and repairing the grid is just not fully trained yet. So it's interesting how they use machine learning and virtual reality as a piece of technology to help training on site and real time train the new repairmen. So technology, in my view, is certainly an enabler, but of course it has to be used with we have to be cautious how we use it, and we have to use it in the right way. We should not fear it.
I love what you just said, and if I put it into my 4-step or 4-phase typology, you've just described everything you've just described as step 2, which is innovation, the virtual reality to transfer learning, the more efficient way of hiring people, the more objective way of judging performance. I think all of that is incredible. I hope we can continue to move it. And you just taught me some things, so thank you for sharing that. It's anyway, very nice. And I hope that's the kind of discussion that, and again, for me, the connection piece is so critical, because I can listen to music. And let me just, this is one I was working on this weekend. I can listen to music, and I can do an iPhone to listen to music. I can get my playlist and I can listen to music. That's a very different experience than going to a concert. And I think the concert is powerful because I feel the music. But I think, and in the world we live in today, we go from activity, listening to music, to the concert, the experience. I think there's the next step beyond the experience. And this is where I'm not sure we've figured out how to fully use technology, although we're getting closer. And that's the connection. And that's meaning. So I listen to music. That's nice. I go to a concert. But somehow that concert is an experience for me that brings back meaning and purpose. And I think the third level is not activity experience, but in the connection phase, it's meaning. So my wife and I, this is embarrassing, we're both more senior than almost anybody on the call. We had an artist we really enjoyed, and the folks from Greece will appreciate. Her name was Nana Mouskouri. We really enjoyed her music when we were young and in, well, I was going to say young and in love. We're old and still in love. But when we were that young love and all the excitement and vibrancy that comes with that, we love Nana Mouskouri songs. So a number of years ago, we decided to go to a Nana Mouskouri concert. The first thing we realized is everybody who was there was old, because so were we, because that was her target. But as we listened to her songs, I remember holding my wife's hand even tighter, because it wasn't just the concert. It it evokes some of the feelings I had for my wife 35 or 40 years ago when we were feeling the music's passion in our lives. And it reminded me of those relationships and the power of that relationship. I think that's where we need to figure out how technology can get us there. And it's not, I'll give one example. I was with a pizza company, and they aren't doing this yet, and I won't name them because they haven't committed to it. And they said, we're finding that when people were in their younger, they remember going Friday night and having pizza with their family at a pizza house. Well, today they don't do that. They have pizza delivered, and they're not having the same kind of experience. And so here was the idea they came up with. We happen to have 3 children. I have a sister. I have a mother. I have about 10 of us in my close social network, my wife's brothers and sisters. And so the pizza place said, you live all over in diverse parts in the United States or around the world. At 6 o'clock on Friday night, a pizza will be delivered to each of your homes, whatever time that is where you are. And we are now going to get technology, FaceTime or some other internet technology, that will have a screen where we are all going to eat pizza together while we have a family conversation. I think that's so cool because it's not about the food. It's not about the meal. It's about meaning. And when the technology allows my family around the country, around the world to get together, eating pizza and talking to each other, it brings back the memories of when I was 13 or 14 years old and my mom and dad and sister and I went to a pizza shop for dinner on Friday night. How do we use technology blended with relationships in order to help people find meaning in what they do? That's where we see organizations and HR in the next generation of technology is using technology to help build some of those kind of connections.
It's brilliant, Dave. Thank you so much for sharing your personal insights and personal experiences as well. One question about the stage 3, you mentioned information. 80% of the data available are unstructured data. So it's very, very difficult to get meaningful information out of the data. And when I speak with HR professionals, they also say that doing HR analytics is a big challenge because they don't have access to data available for finance, available for marketing. So you wrote a very, very interesting paper with Thomas Rasmussen, head of HR analytics at Shell, about HR analytics, whether it's the next sort of management fad. What's your view? What do you suggest? How HR leaders should embark on HR analytics and how to ensure it's embedded in a corporation? It does not just become a management fad again.
What a great question. And let me answer that with research we've done. And you had a lot of pieces of that question, but remember we had 123 competencies of HR people. We collected data from 4,000 HR people as they were assessed by 28,000 other people. So 32,000 data points, big data set. Those 123 competencies fell into 9 domains. One of them was total reward steward, which we talked about, and there were some others. We looked at those 9 domains and their impact on the business. So to what extent does my skill set in this area in HR help the business be successful? And one of those 9 domains was HR analytics. And it's really interesting. In Saudi Arabia last week, in China last week, I said, so where is HR analytics today? Is it in one of the top 3 of those 9 domains in business impact? Is it the middle 3 or is it the bottom 3? And here's what we found. It's in the bottom third. HR analytics today, knowing HR analytics today is not driving business results, which was a stupendous finding. And it puts a hole in that HR analytics balloon. So we had to look behind it. Here's what we found. Most of the HR analytics today is about HR. How many people went to training? What was their satisfaction? What's the time to hire? What's the HR dashboard? What's the HR scorecard? In fact, I did a book in the 1990s called HR Scorecard with brilliant colleagues, Mark Huslett. And today that book is atrociously out of date. HR analytics should not focus on HR. And that's that third step of digital, which is information. HR analytics should have external sensing. It should focus on the business. It's not about HR. Back to my very first story, the HR professional who attended our training program and went back and asked business leaders what they thought about HR. That's wrong. HR analytics should begin with the business. What is it we're trying to do to win in this marketplace? How do we serve customers? How do we find customers? How do we build our net promoter score? What is it we do to win investor confidence? How do we build our stock price? Those issues should be central to HR information. And that's where I think HR needs to go. That's the skill set for what I think is going to be the future of HR.
Thank you very much. So it's always start with the business problem, always look at the organization as a whole and try to find answers to those challenges by solving actual business problems. Very, very insightful. Thank you for sharing it. Moving on to the last segment, last 10, 15 minutes of this interview, this webinar about the future of HR. We all love to look in a crystal ball and find out where the professional will be going in the next 10, 15, 30 years or so. So the first question I'd like to ask, what do you see? What are the mega trends that will be impacting HR in 2018? How different is it going to be from 2016, 2017?
Mega trends are patterns that continue. We've done some writing called, in the business strategy world, Michael Porter said there's 5 forces for strategy. We think there's 4 forces, mega trends, changing HR. One is just the business context. And under number 1 are a lot of things. That's digitization, it's millennials, it's political changes, it's economic changes, consolidation, convergence of industries, it's social changes, just a whole host of business context. Trend number 2 is the pace of change. We talk about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity. That pace of change has to shift from an intellectual, the pace is changing, to knowing how you respond. In fact, we were working last night on our next book that VUCA needs to evolve, that it's not about volatility. It's about defining and discovering where you win in a world of change. It's not about uncertainty. It's about the management of risk. It's not about complexity. It's around managing ecosystems. But these changes are real. So number 1 is context. Number 2 is change. Number 3, stakeholders are removing boundaries. The relationship between an employee and customer is high. And in fact, in some companies, we now see a vice president of the employee experience and the customer experience. And they're having to meld those two. We're seeing a connection between marketing, IT, finance, and HR. And it's the intersection of those different experts that are helping us succeed. So number 1, context. 3, change. 4, boundaryless stakeholders. And 5, we still have to go back to the individual. Organizations are entities that have an identity, but those identities are shaped by the individuals. And in the world we live in today, we're seeing increasing isolation, increasing separation, and we have to find ways to help individuals find meaning. And it's that piece of meaning that I talked about earlier where I think we're going to see some enormous progress, that it's not about satisfaction. Do I like my job? It's not even around engagement. Do I do my job well? It's around meaning. Do I find personal meaning and purpose from the job I do? And that's the piece where I think we're going to get more. One of the shifts in that area, and we may talk about other shifts, comes from great work by Marshall Goldsmith. I think in most of the employee engagement work, the responsibility for engagement is on the organization. Does my boss give me skills? Does the organization pay me well? Marshall has found, and it's really a brilliant idea, if in front of each of those questions, put the line, do I do my best? Do I do my best to work with my boss? Do I do my best to earn my pay? Do I do my best to find a friend at work? Meaning is not something somebody gives me. It's something I'm an agent to achieve. And when we can help people recognize their own responsibility for discovering their meaning and then using the organization to help them find it, I think we're going to see the intersection between organization and people much better. So 4 mega trends: context, change, stakeholders, and individual meaning. Those would be the 4 trends I see.
It's terrific insight. Particularly, I like the session on the meaning. Employees has to be meaning seekers, not just organizations have to be meaning
By
givers.
the way, you know what's interesting, Mihai, we see that almost everywhere. In architecture, it used to be you build a building to maximize space. Then you build a building to get efficiency. Now in the building, you should find a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. In almost every domain, it's not about the activity and experience. It's about the meaning that you attribute. And meaning comes from relationships. It comes from building connections that are inherently personal. A toy store is getting hurt because Walmart and Amazon are selling more toys. So you can buy toys elsewhere. So what do they do to find meaning in the store? Well, come to our store to buy your toy. We'll build a place where your children can play with toys. But we're also going to have a place where parents can get together with children and we'll bring in some educators. What do we know about parenting 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds? And we'll help you find meaning with the people who shop there at the same time as you. Now, that won't work for everybody, but it's like the Nana Muscuri concert. How do I find meaning in this experience? And that's where I think we're headed, is to use HR to help us find meaning with our employees and in our organizations.
So hopefully we shall be also helping the 700 participants at the HR Congress to find meaning, and that puts the personal connections in place and helps to network across borders and of course learn directly from leading minds of HR like yourself. Thank you very much, David, for these insights and questions. Recently, a few years ago actually, Ramcharan wrote a very provocative article in Harvard Business Review on do we need HR, and you did respond. And one of the questions we received from the audience is about, will HR exist as a function in 2030? And if so, how different it will be from the HR we know today?
Well, first of all, I think that's misrepresenting Ram's article. Ram Charan is one of the most brilliant thought leaders of our generation. And I am just humbled when I have the privilege of listening to him. What he said was, there are really 2 parts of HR. One part is the administrative part. And you talked about it earlier. We get overwhelmed with trivia at administration. He said, we need to do away with that. We need to find a way to do that more efficiently. My comment when I talked to Ram about that is good companies are doing that. 2 years ago, it was through service centers. Today, it's through automation, Internet of Things, machine learning, that I think that's a part of HR we're doing away with. He said the second part of HR is the ability to manage talent, leadership, and organization. Those are my 3 words: talent, leadership, and organization to help a business win. In fact, Ram said HR issues around talent, leadership, and organization are so critical that every company should have a 3-person team or cabal, the general manager, the finance person, and the HR person, who bring finance and then talent, leadership, and organization to the business to win. In fact, I think Ram is saying HR is more critical. I would disagree with Ram a little bit. I don't think it's a 3-person team. I think it's 5. I think we need the general manager who integrates the finance with finance, HR, talent, leadership, and organization. I think we also need the marketing person who can anticipate customers and an information person who can help manage external sensing. But Ram's view is, I think, and I agree with Ram, that I think we're going to see HR split into 2 groups, which has already happened in many big companies. The administrative group being more automated, and that's the efficiency argument I made. And then this strategic HR group really becoming part of the business with the other HR group, with the other business folks.
Thank you very, very much, Dave. It's always a pleasure. It's always an amazing experience to speak to you and get all the information. And it's going to take me another few more weeks just to process and rewatch the recording again, as there's so much wisdom in your words. I really appreciate your time this morning. I know it's early at your end. Those of you who wish to meet Dave in person and an elite panel of speakers, including Hermine Ibarra, Garrett Jones, the Chairman and Chief Executive of WD-40, Gary Ridge, and many, many others, join us at the HR Congress on 28-29 November in Brussels. And for those of you who can't be there with us, follow us on our live stream. Thank you very much again for all of you joining, and see you in Brussels. Goodbye.